Greetings, people of the internet. I'm back with yet another video, and a well-researched video, because I am going to be talking about a dying series that has unfortunately long since been dead. And I'm talking 6 Feet Under, most likely never coming back, and that is, of course, the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series. Now, I have been a fan of the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series for a pretty long time. Ever since Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4, if I'm not mistaken, I've been actively playing the games, and I've basically played all of them, even the DS versions, the Game Boy Advance ones, and every single one, including Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 plus 2, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, which is not exactly something everyone should really be talking about, because Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 was unfortunately when the series kind of died. And I just kind of wanted to showcase my experiences with the series and why it has unfortunately died. So basically, starting in the very early 90s, skateboarding was becoming a popular thing. In the late 70s to early 80s, it was becoming a rising thing, but people wanted to bring that specific sport to a whole new audience. So, Rockstar decided to make a game called Thrasher, which is a skateboarding game, which is basically like a precursor to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, and you can even say that Skater Dies, a precursor to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. But there was a specific arcade game that was, if I'm not mistaken, literally the precursor to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. And I believe it was scored by a great band called Pennywise. And I don't exactly remember the name of it. You can probably look it up and find out for yourself. But that was kind of where skateboarding games became a new medium, because some developers were like, hey, this is a really good game. Why not we bring that to the home console and call it Tony Hawk's Pro Skater for the PlayStation 1. And also the Nintendo 64 and the Game Boy Advance and the N-Gage. And the N-Gage is on a totally different level, but it was one of the many consoles to have the PS1 version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1, which I believe only the PS1 and the N64 had. Basically, any other version of the first Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, it's not going to be great. And this is the game that started it all, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1. And it was a pretty popular game, I would say. And unfortunately, it's not exactly the greatest game out there. It is far from the greatest game out there. But it did spawn a franchise, which was then later followed by Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, which to many people is the far superior version. If you play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, it is the far superior version. And I highly recommend you play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 because it is a very underrated game. And if you own a PlayStation 1 or an original Xbox or literally any console from that time period, you can play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Unfortunately, you're probably not going to get any really good ports of the game, and if you played it on the original platform, it's great. But Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X, which was a precursor to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 plus 2, which was a successor to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater HD, which one of these days I'll have to show you guys gameplay of that, but it is a very glitchy and buggy game that, unless you really want to play it, don't. It's not exactly a worthwhile port, and I highly recommend you don't play it. It's, like I said, a buggy mess, and it sucks compared to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X, which came out for the original Xbox and the original Xbox only, and that has much better levels. And so after Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Then came Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, which was the last, I would say, good Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game for the PlayStation 1, because it was then followed by Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4, which I have a physical copy somewhere. I don't know where it is. And after many spin-off games, then kind of came the side games, because there's like Proving Ground, Project 8, Underground 2, which I actually have a limited edition copy of Tony Hawk's Proving Ground, which is a massive game, but it's also kind of special because this version actually comes with a demo of Guitar Hero 3, which Guitar Hero is going to have to wait another day. But yeah, if you look on the back of the box, it says it includes a demo of Tony Hawk's first Guitar Hero 3, which is really nice. And you get to play, I believe, like the first two set lists and those set of songs. But basically, by the time Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 came out, the game series was on a rise. And with the PlayStation 2 coming out, that's when developers were kind of taking advantage of the fact that they were even better games. That is why, if you play the PlayStation 2 version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 or Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4, they are going to be far more superior than the PlayStation 1 versions. And so basically by this time, we also got games like American Wasteland and Downhill Jam. And then the series kind of took a halt. From good games to bad games. Because there were two games on the Nintendo Wii, aside from Tony Hawk's Downhill Jam, called Tony Hawk Ride and Tony Hawk Grind, which are not good games. Imagine Skate, right? Which is basically everyone's favorite, not Tony Hawk's Pro Skater skateboarding game. And imagine that, but with sucky controls, and for the Wii. Which, crazily enough, they also got a Wii game called Skate.it. Not a good game. Like I said, if you want to play a skateboarding game on the Wii, just don't. If you want to, if you really, really want to, just do the freaking backwards compatibility with the Wii being backwards compatible with the GameCube and just play any of those games using the backwards compatibility ability. And so basically at this point, the franchise was just getting milked to death, which is basically what a lot of people consider to be a cash cow. Basically meaning that there are way too many games in the franchise. That's why a lot of people don't really like Grand Theft Auto that much, is because instead of getting GTA 6, we got more and more DLC for GTA Online. You know, a lot of people didn't like that. And it's kind of like with Minecraft. There are literally like 50 billion different versions of the same game. You know, that is kind of what a cash cow is. You know, too many Assassin's Creed games. Too many games in like the freaking Madden series. That is what's considered a cash cow. Is that it's unfortunately milked to death. And by the time Grind and Ride came out, there were very little attempts to revive the franchise, as the last two games, which were Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater HD, which both came out roughly around the same time and were both kind of reviving the franchise and were meant to sort of give the franchise a new light, unfortunately failed. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater HD was considered a buggy mess from the start, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 was just not considered a good game. And that was kind of the rise and the fall of the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater franchise. And then it's rise again, because in 2020, we got by far one of the best revivals of any franchise. And no, they weren't trying to reboot the game and calling the next game Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. No, they made Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 and reinvented it for a modern day. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 plus 2, which released for Xbox One, PlayStation 4. I think there are even Xbox Series S and PS5 versions out there. And there was also the Switch version, and then there's the recently released PC version that was released on Steam. But this is by far the greatest comeback in any franchise. Basically, if you want to reboot a game, follow the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series, because they basically went from dead to alive again within like a span of 10 years, which not a whole lot of series can really say. And unfortunately, it might just stop there, because Tony Hawk did kind of make a mobile game that was kind of reinventing the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series, but I wouldn't really consider that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game. And also, Vicarious Visions, one of the many original creators of the Tony Hawk's franchise, basically once Neversoft was out the gate, Vicarious Visions swooped in and was like, oh, let's just take back the franchise. And unfortunately, because Vicarious Visions kind of fused in with Blizzard, the company has stated that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 plus 4 never going to exist, which sucks, because I really wanted it. And I was even hoping Bam to come back, because Bam, unfortunately, throughout that time period, wasn't exactly being the greatest person in the world. Now, obviously, he's sober now, which is great for him, and he's recently reunited with a lot of the Jackass cast members. And it was just a major thing, because the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater franchise was eventually associated with a lot of different celebrities. Like I said, Jackass being the main one. Tony Hawk and Jackass, huge buddies. And it's kind of sad that because the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series has died, a lot of people lost hope for the franchise. And that's kind of what I did, because not having a Tony Hawk game for 10 years really sucks, because I've been a huge fan of the game for a very long time, and unfortunately they kind of milked the franchise into oblivion. Kind of how with another Activision franchise, Call of Duty, has been in the past 10 years. Call of Duty Ghosts, World War II, Vanguard, not a whole lot of good games. And I think Cold War was the last really good game that they've released. And Modern Warfare 1, 2, and 3 have not really been the greatest. And hopefully the new Call of Duty game that's releasing is going to be even better. Until then, that was the rise and fall of the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater franchise. Wow, this was one hell of a video to make. I basically just sat down, recorded myself, basically because I didn't really have anything else to do. And I was looking at my game collection, and I was like, I have a lot of Tony Hawk games. Let's just make a video on that. And I was also going to make a video, I was planning on making a video, called The Rise and Fall of the Elder Scrolls franchise, which that's probably going to take way too long for me to make, which might have to be a future video. But yeah, until then, please like and subscribe. This was a fun video to make. And comment down below your favorite Tony Hawk game, or even if you like Tony Hawk. But until then, like, subscribe, comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video, I guess. Bye.